This video does not confirm or diagnose any medical condition. Any health-related mentions are purely alleged and discussed in a general commentary context.
I'm doing that. Here it is, Ray. Don't move. Don't move.
Y'all, this isn't a glow-up arc. This is the echo of a woman stepping out of ruins while millions stare, unsure if they're witnessing survival or the calm before something darker, after everything that once gave her an identity was stripped away. Teyana Taylor didn't break down online. She didn't plead. She vanished, and in fame culture, disappearance is a threat. First, there was Iman Shumpert, vows, children, a romance packaged as real love, a story fans defended like it was their own. Then the structure caved in. Separation headlines, perfect smiles masking private damage. The timeline said she'd bounce back. They always say that, right before reality hits. Then came Aaron Pierre. A quieter phase. Award shows. Lingering looks. That kind of spark that feels intentional, not performative. People whispered, finally. Healing. Safety. A soft landing. But the calm cracked. Another ending. Another vanishing ACT.NO sit-downs. No explanations. Just absence and captions soaked in unspoken grief. And then, out of nowhere, the script flipped. Teyana confirmed she wasn't alone anymore. .no identity. .no image. .no confirmation. Just one sentence that sent a chill through timelines. This time, I'm guarding my peace. That sentence lit a fuse. Comment sections became interrogation rooms. Supporters turned into investigators. Every detail magnified. Shadows analyzed. Jet photos. Hotel lobbies. Wrist shots. Price tags. Then the tone shifted fast. She leveled up. Another wealthy man. Same old pattern. The woman who invested her heart into a marriage, the woman who tried love again and walked away bruised, was suddenly being judged like a suspect. But here's what doesn't sit right. She never responded. Not once. No clapback. No clarification. No emotion on display. Just steady. Detached. Unmoved silence. And that silence isn't peaceful. It's unsettling. Because whispers from people in the know suggest this man isn't just loaded. He holds weight, influence, leverage, and if his name ever surfaces, some reputations won't recover. This isn't a soft launch. It's a countdown. The identity stays locked, the story stays buried, but when it finally breaks, it won't be love people remember. It'll be fallout.
Oh, don't move, you're moving. Don't move.
I love it. My mother was saying.
In the ecosystem of fame, silence is never vacant. It carries weight. It lingers. It studies the room. And when it finally fractures, it shatters stories people assumed were already finished. This narrative doesn't open with love. It opens with ruin. Long before headlines turned her life into guesswork and threads, Teyana Taylor occupied a rare lane in entertainment, controlled, guarded, deliberate. Someone who curated her public image piece by piece and refused to monetize disorder for attention. That discipline earned admiration. It also guaranteed that what followed would hit harder. Her marriage to Iman Shumpert was sold as stability. Two visible figures choosing love without theatrics. Family moments. Quiet confidence. The illusion that celebrity chaos had been kept at bay. Audiences bought into it. Media reinforced it. The industry needed proof that balance was possible. Then the cracks appeared. What surfaced first wasn't scandal, it was absence. Missed moments. Reduced proximity. The energy changed before the headlines caught up. That's usually how endings begin. By the time divorce news broke, the real damage had already unfolded away from cameras. And that's where the tone shifts, because strength, stretched too long, hardens into solitude. After the split, Teyana didn't self-destruct in public. She didn't weaponize press tours. She didn't turn her feeds into battlegrounds. Instead, she chose the most destabilizing move in a spectacle-driven culture: retreat. Silence became armor, but also a verdict. The internet doesn't reward quiet women. It reconstructs them. The gaps she refused to fill were filled for her. Then came the rebound framing. When Aaron Pierre entered the picture, the atmosphere softened overnight. This wasn't chaos. It was restraint. Select appearances. Sparse commentary. Body language speaking louder than captions. The kind of connection people romanticize because it feels authentic, not marketed. They said she was recovering. They said she had earned joy. They said the worst was behind her. But rushed healing has a habit of reopening scars instead of sealing them. That chapter ended quietly, mirroring its beginning. No blame games. No dramatic exits. just disappearance. And once again, Teyana faded into quiet. No explanations. No closure for an audience that had attached itself without invitation. The silence turned suspect. Vague captions appeared. Weariness in her eyes. Posts that felt heavy without context. Viewers began projecting their own conclusions. Sadness became content. And once content ignites, it feeds itself. That's the trap of visibility. When a woman refuses to narrate her pain, others decide the cause, and compassion is rarely their choice. Time passed. Noise dulled into background hum. Attention drifted, or so it seemed. Because while focus shifted elsewhere, something was assembling quietly out of sight. Then came confirmation.no media rollout.no glossy spread.no images. Just acknowledgement. A relationship. Verified. On her terms. And a single line that rewired the conversation. This time, I'm protecting my peace. That sentence struck like a verdict in a courtroom that hadn't realized proceedings had begun, because protection suggests danger, peace implies prior harm, emotional or otherwise. Suddenly, nothing about this felt gentle. The lack of information became the headline. No identity. No face. No timeline. Just boundaries. And in celebrity culture, boundaries read like provocation. Fans didn't wait for facts. They chased breadcrumbs. 5-star destinations were analyzed. Accessories became exhibits. Reflections in windows were treated as sightings. Flight paths tracked. Associations diagrammed. The internet morphed into an unpaid intelligence unit convinced the answer was hiding in plain sight. Then the rhetoric sharpened. She upgraded. She only wants money. She's chasing power, not love. Curiosity curdled into judgment. What made it cruel was the rewrite. The woman who invested years into a marriage was flattened into a stereotype. The woman who stayed silent through heartbreak was recast as strategic. Silence stopped being strength, it became evidence, according to public opinion. But something halted insiders mid-sentence. She never answered back. No indirect jabs. No public defenses. No image repair. Nothing. And in gossip ecosystems, silence after accusation signals either defeat or dominance. Whispers began circulating that the secrecy wasn't theatrical. It was protective not only of her emotions, but of something bigger. Something not meant for public consumption. Something that, if revealed too early, could ripple far beyond comment sections. Speculation multiplied. Some claimed the man existed outside entertainment entirely. Others suggested influence strong enough to avoid visibility by design. A few hinted that his eventual exposure would trigger uncomfortable conversations in circles that survive by staying unseen. Through it all, Teyana remained measured. No visible celebration. No visible fear. Just composure. A composure that unsettled those waiting for either joy or collapse. Because when a woman stops performing emotion, she disrupts the systems built to profit from her vulnerability. This wasn't an announcement. It was resistance. A refusal to justify herself. A refusal to feed the machine. A refusal to unravel on command. And refusals carry repercussions. Because when truth is withheld long enough, its release doesn't clarify, it explodes. This opening chapter isn't about the mystery man. It's about why his identity carries enough weight to be guarded at all costs. And if the murmurs hold any truth, when the name finally surfaces, it won't just stun spectators. It will demand accountability. This is not a romance. It's the prelude to something far more severe. And the audience hasn't yet realized the trial is already underway. The instant the confirmation surfaced, the internet didn't pause, it pounced. Not with applause, not with reassurance, but with doubt sharpened into fixation. Because when Teyana Taylor acknowledged a new relationship without receipts, identities, or a timeline, she broke an unwritten rule of fame. The outrage wasn't about her moving forward. It was about her doing it without consent. That's when curiosity hardened into cross-examination. Every prior chapter was yanked back into the spotlight. Her marriage to Iman Shumpert stopped being remembered as love that ran its course. It was rebranded as calculated alignment. Old interviews resurfaced. Frames were frozen. Smiles slowed, scrutinized, decoded. Self-appointed analysts reached verdicts without evidence. She was never fulfilled. He limited her. She evolved past him. None of it verified. All of it delivered like fact. Then the rebound storyline was dragged back out. Her connection with Aaron Pierre was reframed, no longer recovery, but rehearsal. Voices began claiming he was a temporary stop, a placeholder on the way to something higher. The message was unmistakable. Affection was secondary. Advancement was the motive. And in gossip logic, advancement always traces back to wealth and influence. That's when speculation slid into something colder. Faceless accounts suggested the new partner wasn't visible. He was shielded. Absent not by choice, but by necessity. Untagged because his sphere doesn't brush against stan culture or premieres. A man whose privacy wasn't curated, but enforced. Screenshots appeared, then evaporated. Rumored sightings went live, then vanished. Profiles locked down overnight. And a disturbing pattern emerged. Nothing leaked. In an industry where secrets circulate like currency, this one refused to move. Which meant someone was holding the line. And holding the line implies power. As theories multiplied, hostility followed. What's he hiding replaced who is he? Accusations sharpened. Old, familiar labels resurfaced: climber, opportunist, manipulator. The internet reached for its most worn scripts and recast her without hesitation. But there was a flaw no one wanted to address. If this was about exposure, secrecy was pointless. If it was about prestige, anonymity worked against it. If it was about attention, silence was sabotage. Unless attention was the very thing being rejected. Those close to the machinery of fame whispered that her stillness wasn't apathy, it was control. Not a woman drowning in chaos, but one starving it deliberately. A discipline forged through years of being dissected for decisions made while under siege. That's when timelines became telling. People noticed how swiftly she vanished after emotional breaks. How often she chose absence over explanation. How rarely she corrected the record, even as it bent against her. A pattern surfaced. Not manipulation, retreat as survival. But restraint earns no mercy online. Comment sections morphed into tribunals. Influencers profited off conjecture. Podcasts spun episodes from unnamed sources. The stories swelled beyond containment. Still, nothing from her .no rebuttal .no context .no visible strain. And that lack began to feel deliberate. Because silence sustained under assault isn't surrender. It's declaration. A signal that truth doesn't require immediate witnesses. Off-screen, another shift occurred. Industry voices stopped engaging. Mentions disappeared. Posts were scrubbed. It felt like an invisible boundary had been crossed once. After that, the subject went untouchable. Why? Because those watching closely understood this wasn't about dating. It was about proximity. About access. About spaces where names aren't spoken lightly because they arrive with consequences. That's when unease set in. If the man could remain unseen, what did exposure endanger? Deals? Alliances? Reputations sustained by discretion? The narrative pivoted again, from who is he? To why won't anyone say? That question carries weight no one wants to lift. Meanwhile, her composure never fractured. She appeared steady, intentional, almost distant. Not celebratory, not defensive, simply grounded. A posture that rattled those conditioned to expect unraveling. Because women who don't collapse on cue disrupt the spectacle, and disruption invites retaliation. Criticism escalated. Her quiet was recast as arrogance, as evasion, as evidence of something darker. The calm that suggested agency was reframed as menace. Control became threat. Yet the harder the pressure mounted, the clearer one truth became. She wasn't participating. This wasn't promotion. This wasn't reinvention. This wasn't crisis management. It was containment. And containment exists only when something requires protection. The irony cuts deep. The internet demanded transparency from a woman who had already paid for visibility with her piece. They wanted entry into something she had clearly removed from public ownership. That choice carries repercussions. Because when the reveal finally arrives, and it won't register as gossip. It will register as disruption. The kind that forces a re-examination of every assumption built along the way. This stopped being about affection. It's about leverage, about who is allowed to vanish, about who can protect themselves without being punished for it. And as the volume rises, one reality is becoming undeniable. Whatever this relationship represents, it was never designed for consumption. And the longer it remains concealed, the more volatile the aftermath will be once it surfaces. Because secrets don't disappear, they wait. The fracture point didn't come with an identity. It arrived as unease. Because by then, this narrative had expanded beyond gossip. It was no longer centered on who Teyana Taylor was seeing. It was about who suddenly became unsayable. Something shifted in the atmosphere. Profiles that once speculated relentlessly went dormant. Threads dissolved mid-debate. Creators who teased bombshell revelations abruptly redirected to harmless content. That's when the pattern became undeniable. This wasn't neglect. It was evasion. In the economy of fame, avoidance is a signal. Clout-driven rumors don't silence people. Authority does. Behind the scenes, enthusiasm curdled into restraint. Publicists stopped answering. Bloggers softened their tone. Qualifiers like alleged and unverified multiplied overnight. Even the loudest commentators lowered their volume. Why? Because each step closer to clarity was met with resistance, and resistance suggests limits imposed by something heavier than online outrage. The irony cuts deep. For years, Teyana had been framed as strong yet reachable, a figure whose life could be analyzed, critiqued, consumed. Her marriage to Amon Shumpert had been visible enough to invite opinion, yet guarded enough to retain respect. When it dissolved, she absorbed the fallout quietly. No public vendettas. No spectacle. Then came the next chapter. Her connection with Aaron Pierre was reduced by outsiders into a rebound for narrative convenience. When that chapter closed, audiences felt entitled to explanations she never consented to provide. What followed wasn't curiosity. It was discipline. The internet doesn't punish mistakes. It punishes the denial of access. So when she acknowledged a new relationship without supplying details, it wasn't interpreted as growth. It was taken as defiance. And defiance, especially from women who refuse to dramatize vulnerability, provokes a predictable response. Question her, undermine her, shrink her. But the strategy collapsed. She didn't bend. No reactive posts. No emotional confessions. No strategically timed leaks to manage optics. Only continued quiet. And silence paired with certainty destabilizes systems that rely on exposure. As weeks passed, a different understanding surfaced. This wasn't concealment of scandal. It was protection of something rare. Speculation recalibrated. This time, it wasn't about wealth or celebrity. It was about closeness. About spheres untouched by entertainment chatter. About individuals whose influence functions beyond searchable databases. That's when protected began circulating in hushed conversations, not guarded by public relations, guarded by infrastructure. That distinction matters. Public relations shapes perception. Infrastructure enforces consequence. If this man operated within a realm where invisibility equals power, exposure wouldn't be inconvenient, it would be destabilizing. Not for fans, but for systems designed to remain unseen. Which explains the most telling anomaly. Nothing surfaced. No insider photos. No grainy nightlife shots. No friend of a friend confirmations. In a culture where secrets evaporate instantly, this one endured. 4 months. That endurance is evidence. Meanwhile, Teyana's presence sharpened rather than amplified. Appearances were intentional. Words deliberate. She spoke of peace without narrating the cost. She didn't market joy. She demonstrated boundaries. That unsettled people. Because audiences aren't conditioned to accept resolution without disclosure. They expect arcs, lessons, emotional releases. She denied all three. So the internet authored its own conclusion. Her composure became strategy. Her privacy became manipulation. Her restraint became arrogance. Yet none of it held. There was no inconsistency to exploit. No misstep to magnify. No fracture to widen. And that's when momentum died. Stories feed on reaction. Outrage survives on response. Without it, even the loudest narratives wither. The story didn't conclude. It paused. Which is far more volatile. Observers began suggesting that when truth finally emerges, it won't arrive through gossip pipelines. It will surface obliquely. Through association rather than announcement. Through consequence rather than confession. And when it does, it will force a reassessment of everything prior. Why the quiet mattered. Why secrecy was absolute. Why certain voices chose distance over commentary. This isn't a headline waiting to break. It's a reckoning waiting for alignment. Here's the discomfort at its core. Teyana Taylor didn't surrender authorship of her narrative. She reclaimed it. At the expense of being misread. At the cost of accusation. At the sacrifice of public ease. Because control isn't always noisy. Sometimes it manifests as composure under pressure. The internet demanded spectacle. She offered absence. And in that absence, she revealed something far more unsettling than any identity ever could. The boundary. Because when a public figure decides their life is no longer shared property, the outrage isn't rooted in curiosity. It's rooted in revoked entitlement. This story remains unresolved not because information is lacking. It remains unresolved because permission was rescinded. And until that permission returns, if it ever does, speculation will remain suspended in discomfort. Uninformed, anticipating. Because the most destabilizing reality is simple. Some narratives aren't owed to the audience. And this one never was. This is where the narrative stops feeling like spectacle and starts cutting close to the bone, because what's unfolding isn't a celebrity guarding a romance, it's Teyana Taylor refusing to sacrifice herself for an audience that made up its verdict long ago. Every pause, every limit, every unanswered charge is proof that betrayal doesn't always come from intimacy. Sometimes it comes from the masses who claimed loyalty first. The internet converted her heartbreak into entertainment, rebranded her restraint as secrecy, recast her healing as something to be cross-examined. And now, with facts still withheld, the same voices demanding clarity are the ones who sharpen knives using her history. A marriage reduced to incompetence. Affection reframed as calculation. Suffering treated like evidence. This has moved past curiosity. It's discipline for choosing calm over collapse. Here's where it turns volatile. If the truth surfaces, it won't appease anyone. If it never does, the conjecture won't die. Either path extracts a cost. That's the snare. A woman endures loss, learns control, chooses quiet, and is still charged with deceit. The crowd doesn't actually want honesty. It wants entitlement. And when entitlement is denied, it strikes back. So consider this before the next narrative circulates. Who gains from her exposure? Who monetizes her wounds? Who keeps amplifying theories while she refuses to respond? Because when this finally ruptures, and it will, the jolt won't be tied to an identity. It will come from recognizing how fast compassion curdled into ownership, how effortlessly encouragement became surveillance, how comfort was demanded from someone already depleted. This isn't a romance awaiting verification. It's a cautionary signal about what happens when boundaries threaten an economy fueled by consumption. Pay attention, not to the reveal, but to who fades from view once the truth lands.